Okay, so as far as I am aware, we are trying to build an input sponge. So we have a character that we put inputs into, and then the player controller will sponge those inputs up, and then it will like squeeze those inputs out to other characters. At least that's how I understood it. So if I just show you what I got here, I can move, and then about 7 seconds later, the other player will move. Actually, you know what? What we'll do is I'll go in here, delay. We'll change this down to like 30 so we can see this a little better. I'll go over here. He'll come over here too. If I go over here and I can go to sleep, he'll come over here. He'll go to sleep, and then I'll wake up, and then he'll wake up, and then I can go over here. I can go to sleep, and then I can wake up, and then he'll come over here. He'll go to sleep, and he'll wake up. But I can go over here, go to sleep, wake up, and then go to here. But he just goes there, goes to sleep, and wakes up. And so there's a problem with my system, and we'll get into that. But first, I just wanted to show you what I had working and what the bug was, what the only bug was that I could actually tell that I have. Now, there is also one other thing that I would like to mention. Now, this is actually kind of a feature or a bug, depending on whether or not how you want your game to work. So what I did is, where is it? Yeah, it's in here. If I bypass this move result hit, and then I grab this hit result right here, and I put this hit result in there, and instead of, and then doing it in here as well, I didn't need to put it in that one, just that one. This is actually, we could probably delete that. That's not right. This is right though. Okay, so now, what did I just do? Okay, so essentially, what I changed was the fact that I was storing the hit in a variable. So if I click right here, and then I move the mouse over here, when he moves over there now. So I can move here, but keep my mouse here, and he'll move to me. See? And so if I change this, if I put that back in there, and then change this hit, and change that hit, and then I play it. Now if I play here, and then move my mouse here, he still moves to where I went. Okay? So that was the bug / feature, whichever one seems like a good idea, okay? But here's the problem. When I go and I play, and I move, I die, I wake up, and I move, he just moves to the second move, correct? Okay. Well, since that's the first problem that we have, we can solve that in a second. Or we can look at solutions to solving that in a second, rather. What I want to show you is how this is set up now. So essentially, we have this base character that has sleep, wake up, and move to. And now these are just functions inside this character. He doesn't really have anything set up for him. All he's got is these 3 functions. And then, yeah, of course, he's got a mesh set up for him and whatnot. But that's basically it. Now, the player character, if you go in here and you simulate this guy, and you'll see that it's weird because he actually, for whatever reason, he automatically falls. I'm not sure exactly why this is, but yeah, this is not supposed to be like this. If I stop this and simulate this, you should be able to see him fall somewhere. Oh, wait. There it goes. You can see him. He's fallen. I'm very far away. Actually, I wonder if I can... Yeah, see? He just automatically falls. I have no idea why that is, but... And I'm not really sure. But it shouldn't matter. Anyways, this player character is the one that, if you were going to implement health in, this would, I think, so I don't really know exactly how you want to make your game, but the way that I decided to solve the problem of that input thing is that, you know, I had these functions right here. These would be basically what you know, like, oh, I want to move to here, I want to do this, I want to do that. These are just different functions that you'd be able to do. So like if you wanted to interact in an object, like, so let's say that there was a locked door and you had a lockpick, and so you would add a function here, say lockpick, and you would just call that in the controller, and then just delay it. And the reason why I chose to do it this way, and probably this is actually a bad idea, I don't know yet, but as you can see, we're starting to get some problems when we set it up. So because remember, if I move, go to sleep, wake up, and then move, he moves to the second one. So there's some sort of input buffering that we need to be doing, because if we just move and go to sleep and then wake up and then he starts doing his thing, I can move again, and then he'll come over here and move over here. So it's kind of interesting problem, right? Because there's a lot of things that could go wrong. Going back to this, like the fact that if we bypass that hit result setting of a variable, we're able to have totally different functionality. And so I think what we need to do in order to solve that problem of having the person move for the second time is to think about our move to function that we're calling in this part right here. This is in the controller, and this is like in the RTS example. When you click, you call this hit move to hit location, and you get yours. You get your location. You try to track the location of your location, and you get the vector length of that, and you see if the distance that you need to travel is greater than the minimum click distance, and the minimum click distance is 120 units. So if I go in here and I click right here, and then I click like right there, he's not gonna try and move until right there. You see that small little distance? Now if I change that to something more great, like 1200, which is huge, I can't move at all in a 1200 by 1200 radius until I get out of that and I move somewhere like over here. Just can't, and then can. Okay, so that is part of the RTS example itself, but in this move to, this is the move to that's in the base character. We're calling that base character function in it. So this is actually where we would want to think about having additional functionality for moving, because we're calling that on that one and that one. So what would we actually want to do here? Because and I might have glanced over some things, but I guess I'll know what I screwed up on when I go back to the when I go back to edit this. But essentially we have a base character that has some functionality, and we have a shadow character. This is the character that has, you know, the camera, the mouse clicking thing, the cursor to roll decal component, that green little circle that's on the ground, and then also like it handles stuff like getting the mouse position in the world, and like we don't need to do that in every character, so we extended upon our base character to have additional functionality that our player character, which is the one that gets spawned, that guy, the one that would, so going back to what I was saying before, I don't really know how your game is going to work. Is we need to know how the player character and shadow character interact with each other. Can I, as the shadow character, move through the player character? Can I, as the player character, die? Can I, as the shadow character, die? Does the shadow character have hit points? If he has hit points, does the player character have hit points, and which one do I take damage from? If I move my actual shadow character and I go in a trap and I'm not supposed to die, we need to make sure that the shadow character and that the player character can be we can distinguish them from each other. So that is why I decided to use an object-oriented design structure of our character to have this hierarchical data set that says, hey, I have a base character that has some functionality that will have that has both the player character and shadow characters stuff in it. So moving, sleeping, waking up, all that is in the base, and we use the player character as that would. The way I was thinking it is he would have the health, the shadow character could move through the player character, and that if we go into a trap, the player character would die, but the shadow character would be unaffected. And that we could go up to something, say like a button, as the shadow character, and it'd be able to interact with it, and then like have no effects happen to it. But once you do that, your player character goes up there, interacts with it, and it actually does something at that stage. I could be totally wrong at how you wanted to set up the game, but that's how I was thinking. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but I guess that's the direction I was kind of taking. I'm not really sure, but as you can see, I can't walk through the character yet, or any. The only functionality that exists really is just walking, going to sleep, waking up, and that's it. And so, going back to how the data is structured, is you have that base character, then the shadow character is extended from the base character, and the player character is also extended from the base character. So our player character gets spawned by our shadow character. So our shadow character is the one that has the player controller. So it goes like this. The shadow character spawns in the world, which will spawn a top-down controller, and that top-down controller controls the shadow character and takes the input and gives it to directly the shadow character. The shadow character, once it spawns, it also spawns a player character, and that player character is set in a variable. And so when the controller begins play, it will delay some time until after the shadow character has actually created the player character, and then it gets a reference to that. And then we're able to basically just defer our inputs. So we say, oh, K will go to sleep, okay? So when we press sleep, we'll go to sleep, and then we'll delay a little bit, and then we'll tell the player character to sleep. Now, I don't know if this is a great idea, but it is definitely one of the easiest ways to implement it. And so I think that's it in terms of functionality wise, like how everything works. You have the base character, the player, and the shadow character extend that base character. The shadow character spawns the player controller and spawns the player character. The player controller controls the shadow character directly. It is what the shadow character is possessed by. The player character is not possessed by the top-down controller. It just has a default controller attached to it. Nothing, no coded anywhere. It's just when it spawns, it gets a default controller. Now that you can change that if you want, but there's if you want like some additional functionality in the player controller of that player character, but really you really don't need it, since you're essentially using one single controller to control two characters. Now, I don't know if this delay is a great idea, because we could think about how that could actually mess up. And in fact, if we go back in here and I move, I die, I spawn, I move, he moves at the second movement. Now, I don't know if this is directly related to the delaying of it, but I do know that if you take out delaying, that it behaves much differently, and I'll show you that. And so what we'll do is we'll just bypass everything, okay? So we'll just bypass those delays and bypass this delay. So now when I play this, he's going to do exactly what I do at the same time. So I go here, I go to sleep, he goes to sleep, I wake up, I move. So we are essentially controlling two players with the same exact controller. Now when I go to sleep and I wake up, going to sleep doesn't enable you to, or doesn't disable your input to the control to the player. So you can move, you can go to sleep, you can walk around as both of those players, and then when you wake up, all of a sudden you're over here because your characters are actually still moving. And so so if I move, die, wake up, move, it works perfectly. Well, it works well enough. The reason why they're trying to move to the same exact location is just they're trying to move to the same exact location. They have too big of a capsule component to where they can't actually get there because they're blocking each other. And so there's another move method which you are moving to a location, and if you're in a certain amount of radius, an acceptable radius, then you'll stop moving. And I forget how to do that, but you can do that as well if you want to get rid of like some glitchiness, like moving here and then having the black character trying to move at there, but he can't. Now let's try and think about solving the problem of having the character move on the second. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to put these delays back in. We're going to ensure that it is bugged still. Yes. So, what is happening? What is the goal of the solution to the problem? Well, really, we want to be able to do exactly what the player did. And if you decided, okay, I want to record every keystroke, everything that the player inputs, and the length amount of time that they press and hold down it for, and then, you know, releasing keys and stuff like that. That is a lot to manage, and you could theoretically do that, but I just don't know how you would supply those captured inputs into something to where you're actually pressing K. Or like, so for example, if K is sleep and you sponge that K input and say, okay, he pressed K at that time for that amount of length, then he released it at the end of the time. And so you then have to think about, okay, well, what if I have K pressed down and another button pressed down? And then that way your system would have to realize, oh, K is pressed and, you know, space is pressed. And when does K end? And when does space end? Or rather, when do they release? And so that is why I was thinking that the State Machine plugin that they did on the streams a couple weeks now in a row, I think they're on part 4 now, would be they're doing a fighting game system where they do like combos and stuff. And the way I was thinking it is that since you're doing combos and you're absorbing that input and you're looking at that, well, you could do it that way, essentially, because it would know that kind of stuff, like, oh, is and probably is the correct way to do it. But going to this system, I think we can solve it, but I'd have to think about it. And it's an interesting problem to be like, okay, yeah, I want, you know, of course I want the character to do everything that I did iteratively. And so you could like think of creating a list of like all the different things that they did, but like, how do you go from capturing the K button, like, oh, he pressed the letter K, and like saving, I don't know, the letter K out to a file, and then Like maybe when he releases the button, you say -K, on a new line, and so it would be like K new line -K, and that would be essentially all the, like, if that's all that you inputted into the game, that's all that would be in the file, and essentially it would just do that. But like you then have to be like, oh, K new line, you know, how long has it been since they pressed K, and then you would, you know, -K. And so like the problem I see with that system is that how do we go from having that file of buttons and timestamps and all that stuff to putting that into the controller, like inputting the K? How do we call K without, because there's if I type in K here, if I do this, it just is that. I don't get, there's nothing else that I can do. There's no function I can call K, and I can't say, you know, there's no function that I can say, hey, this controller, press this, like, and then release it in code. Like, there's no way to do that. So I don't know. This is an interesting problem, and I didn't really mean to make this 21 minutes long, and maybe I'll cut it down. But geez, this is pretty long as is. So I guess that's it. I know we didn't really get into solving that bug, but it's something we have to think about further, because this is all I've gotten so far.